Welcome to my Numidian horsemanship sampler. Of course, I have no idea how the North African people known as the Numidians really worked with their horses. But we do know that they were considered the finest light cavalry at the time and rode into battle without the use of a regular bridle and with a second horse following along completely unrestrained. They had no way to compel their horses to do anything. They relied on their relationship and the innate loyalty and generosity of their equine friends to see them through battle. Like the ancient Numidians, instead of forcing horses into submission, I create the conditions that allow them to work with me of their own volition. There are a few prerequisites that must be in place for a horse to want to collaborate with me. First, the horse must trust me. In order for him to place his trust in me, my actions must be predictable. I become predictable when I am behaviorally consistent. These three closely related concepts rest on the most important element of them all. Everything I do is based on the realization that a horse's opinions, wishes, and fears are, without exception, valid and must be taken into consideration in everything we ask of them. Through this acceptance of their agency and their rights to self-determination, we express respect. So while a lot of people emphasize the need to teach your horse to respect you, I suggest that you need to respect your horse and that he will, without being taught, respect you when you have proven to him that you are deserving of his respect. As we would with humans, we will use language to make requests of our horses and to respond appropriately to what they tell us. Horses speak using gestures, managing space, and through sound. Sound is the most limited modality, and I don't use it except to express approval and contentment. Unfortunately, most equine expressions are impossible for us to use while in the saddle. Therefore, we use pressure and release, which can only express no and yes. The specific meaning of the pressure used must first be taught to horses within a given context, as that is not part of their natural linguistic repertoire. All the horses in this video are members of my herd. My relationship with each horse is unique, and each horse presents his own challenges and teaching opportunities based on his genetic makeup, his prior experiences with humans, and the strength of our relationship. During the following 20 minutes, we will work on a variety of problems commonly encountered by equestrians. We will halter a difficult-to-catch horse, mount a green horse that has not yet been properly started, and work through resistance with a dominant horse. We will also see how to switch a horse from bitless bridle to Numidian, how to use pointing and the Numidian to ride a horse that is still in the beginning stages of the bridleless experience, how to tell a horse that you want him to walk with you, and finally, what complete harmony and the deepest of friendships can look like. The key elements to remember in everything you do with your horse are: never inflict pain to get your way. Do not expect that your horse thinks of you as a higher order being, and therefore do not expect obedience to your wishes unless you have already earned his respect. In conflict situations, try to de-escalate. Do not try to win. A quick note regarding safety. In this video, I take calculated risks riding horses with only a Numidian bridle and not wearing a helmet. I caution you never to ride without a helmet, and when in doubt, to add an armored vest as well. This horse joined my herd a few months ago because she had become nearly impossible to catch at her previous home. Many years ago, she had her ears twitched, which is probably the root cause of her fear of being caught. Her name is Lady. In this scene, I'm approaching Lady straight on, looking right at her with my shoulders squared and the halter visible in one hand. You can see how she moves away without hesitation, her ears on me. In this next scene, I'm using horse language to tell her, shoulders slumped, eyes averted, head low, that I want to approach her. And when she moves away, I'm telling her, shoulders squared, walking more upright, my body's orientation beginning to point at her, that this is not what I want. My body's entire posture changes based on what Lady is saying in response. After just a few such exchanges, you can see Lady making the decision to trust me and to walk towards me. I then approach her slowly and gently, never hiding the halter, and very slowly put it on. I'm careful not to touch her ears during this process. With a less traumatized horse, I would move more freely. It is important to note that I'm not training Lady to accept the halter. Rather, we are having a conversation about trust. Cassandra is a very green 5-year-old filly who has lived at Flowing Main since she was 4 months old. We have a very trusting relationship, and the first time I mounted after having desensitized her to my weight by laying across her back, I did it exactly the same way I'm doing it here. Using just my Numidian and body language, I asked Cassandra several times to step up to the mounting block. She's swishing her tail, telling me that she does not want to. Her unwillingness here became clear to me later as she had a sore foot. A horse who trusts you and who is not in pain is not likely to buck you off, even when you mount for the first time with nothing but a halter, bitless bridle, or Numidian. It is critical for the horse to remain aware that the weight on his back is you and not some predator. So almost simultaneously with mounting, I reach around Cassandra and scratch her under her neck. I often give horses a treat right after mounting, because instead of wanting to move off immediately, they are motivated to stand still and wait for their cookie. Gilly is the alpha male of a herd of 8 horses and, despite what you're about to see, a very close friend of mine. His naturally dominant disposition causes him to say no with a lot of force. With horses like him, to remain safe as a rider, you must de-escalate the disagreement and prevent it from becoming a fight. Having hardly ridden in well over a year, I'm in no shape to win against a horse such as him anyway. Please note that I constantly remind him of our friendship. Like with Cassandra, I pet and groom him whenever I can. Using a side pull, I can prevent Gilly from taking over completely. But I use the reins as little as possible while releasing immediately, when he stops pulling. I don't stop him from trotting, as horses translate frustration or anxiety into motion. I much prefer that motion to be forward rather than up. Gilly uses a broad range of expressions to convince me to let him back into the pasture with his friends. He swishes his tail. He throws his head with pride and frustration. He dances a little. He arches his back to give me fair warning that there is a limit to what he will accept. His head is high because his arousal levels are high. The fight or flight response, fight in Gilly's case, is being activated, preventing him from responding thoughtfully. I engage with his tantrum by telling him that I understand his point. I do this by not shutting him down and letting him return to the gate he so badly wants to go through. But I nevertheless want him to listen to my request, something I express by repeating it without becoming louder. I'm in no hurry for him to stop telling me what he thinks. And slowly his head comes down. His misgivings become less forceful, and he begins to remember that, in our friendship, he too has to compromise. Several times I ask him to turn around and go back to where he wants to go anyway, in part to remind him that listening to me can get him what he wants. I stroke his neck, ever reminding him that we are talking as friends and not fighting as enemies. He rewards this by reducing the energy of his statements. You can see that he begins to respond to a completely loose rein, with only my finger pointing where I want to go. He is less agitated now than he was and more content to be with me. By the end of this footage, he would have carried me wherever I wanted to go, with only a small amount of resistance. Gilly needs to be respected for who he is, a proud and powerful quarter horse with a kind heart. I can get him to do as I ask by asking gently, no matter how he responds, and by being consistent. If you give him the respect he craves and let him get his grievances off his chest, he will carry you happily into the mountains and keep you safe. The concepts I teach not only apply to horses. While evolution caused each species to develop distinct behavioral adaptations, horses, humans, and llamas are all mammals, and we share some basic behavioral parameters. For example, looking down and away is a sign of non-aggression among all the mammals with whom I have ever worked. I also groom Zappa, as I do the horses, and he clearly enjoys that. Putting his ears back, as he does, when I get up to leave, does not seem to have the same adversarial meaning it might have when horses or dogs flatten their ears. Chloe has not been ridden much, and is not a seasoned horse on any dimension. But she has a sweet disposition. Lacking riding experience, Chloe has preferred the sidepull over the Numidian as it provides more certainty. As soon as I switch from the reins to the Numidian, she no longer responds to my directional requests. Her insecurity manifests itself immediately in how she ignores me and heads straight for Laurie, the videographer. Chloe seems to be seeking help from Laurie, or just wanting to engage with another human so as not to have to engage with me. As you can see in this view from the side of the same scene, Chloe is tense and completely unresponsive to me. Using both the Numidian and the sidepull allows me to explain the same request in two different ways. Her expressions of resistance remain very mild, and she is keeping an open mind towards me, doing her level best to avoid a confrontation. Still, as we move off, I ask her to turn to her right, but she does the opposite. Next, Chloe has gathered her mental faculties and, after a few more headshakes, is beginning to tune into me. You can see how the Numidian is becoming an effective means of communication. I no longer have to use the reins at all. At this point, I decide to try without the sidepull altogether. Chloe has demonstrated to me that she can remain calm and collected, the absolute prerequisite to switching to a Numidian bridle. As I take off the sidepull, she becomes just a tiny bit nervous. But as soon as it's gone, her head drops, and she appears much more comfortable than before. She also very much tunes into me and veritably listens for the slightest input. Please note how I move the Numidian up towards her head when I need to make my request a little more strongly. I very often use my hands to point where I want to go. The movement causes your horse to move his head in that direction, which leads to the body following easily. After I dismount, I groom her. Grooming is above anything else an expression of friendship and will not be reciprocated by your horse if he doesn't consider you a friend, or if the time you just spent together was unpleasant for him. Sylph is one of 2 Arabians in my herd, a breed gifted with intuition. Please note how this horse, of her own volition, steps closer to the fence so I can mount. Sylph is a reasonably experienced horse, but she has deep anxiety issues. At this point, she could not carry me away from the safety of the herd. Her ears were twitched so viciously that the cartilage in both of them was broken. Sylph is extremely flighty, and alongside Lady, the most nervous horse in my herd. She carries her head almost always high, because she is almost always afraid. For a few years now, Sylph has regularly refused to carry other riders. But the last time I rode her, she also refused to move forward for me. That is, until I let go of everything, closed my eyes, and rested my head on her neck to prove to her that I would not use any form of pain to force her to move. In that moment, she started to walk. I expected to use her in this video to show how kindness can overcome deep-seated fear, but as you can see, she never hesitated for 1 second. As your relationship changes, as you become a kinder and gentler person, as you accept no for an answer from your horse, everything else changes too. Sylph now enjoys the company of humans and decided to visit the videographer, just in case a cookie was to be had. We are now back to Lady, and I used the same basic expressions with which I asked her earlier to stand and let me put on the halter, to ask her to follow me without a halter. I become small and look away when she follows, and big and straight when she veers off. See how she tries to determine the direction by stepping in front of me. This does not upset me in the least. I just keep walking where I want to go, and Lady, despite clearly wanting to go towards where her herdmates are, decides to follow. In conclusion, respecting your horse as a fellow being with legitimate emotional needs and rights, while making an effort to understand what he's trying to tell you, and taking his concerns seriously, will allow you to create a most harmonious relationship. Not a relationship where he obeys your every wish, but one where the requests you want to make will not go beyond what is reasonable from your horse's point of view. Thank you for wanting to become a better friend to your horse by using the concepts expressed in this video.